Okay, welcome once again to Real Big Ten Football Talk Plus One with Chris. Like I said in the last video, plus one again means that each week I will be talking about one particular matchup that interests me, usually one between two ranked opponents outside of the Big Ten Conference. Again, not to add any more hype than already is around that game, but that plus one this week will be number 19 Texas facing number 7 Oklahoma, and of course Dallas, Texas in the Red River Shootout. But for this game, I will be talking about number 15 Michigan and unranked Maryland. It will be in the Big House. For those of you that don't know what the Big House is, that is Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Michigan Stadium is his official name, but has been called the Big House as I can remember. These two teams don't elicit a huge emotional response, I don't think, in a lot of people, because it's just not a storied rivalry. You don't have a whole lot of history behind it. Yeah, they played here and there over the past, I don't know how many years. They've both been around for a long time. But really, they didn't really start playing each other until more recently, when Maryland and Rutgers both came into the Big Ten back in, I think it was 2013. So they've only been playing each other since then in the Big Ten, because they have been in the same division, I think, since the beginning. I know when it was the Lears and the Legends, I don't remember if these two were in that same division or not, but they are in both the East Division now. So the last couple years, I think, they've been in the same division, so they play each other every year. This is an intriguing game for me, and I think it's going to be a sneaky good game. I think a lot of people around the country will probably not even really look at it much, unless you're, of course, in the state of Michigan or in the state of Maryland. But they're evenly matched teams statistically, and you'll notice when I start showing the stats, I've got more stats for this game than I did the last game. Reason being, this is such a closely contested matchup, I want to show more stats to show my side of why I'm saying what I'm saying, basically, for lack of better words. The Ohio State-Indiana game, I didn't have as much because I didn't think I needed to show as much, because I was pretty confident in my pick based on what I already had, and that's all I really needed for that particular game. I mean, it's number 3 against unranked. Not saying it always matters, but in that game, the history of that particular matchup, yeah, I didn't really need to add a whole lot of stats to it to really strengthen my point. This game is different. There's not a lot of history behind it. There's not a lot of Michigan's been dominating Maryland or Maryland been dominating Michigan. Yeah, Michigan's been the last couple of years. I want to say the last 3 years, but I can't swear to it. But they're both intriguing teams, but neither one is the, poster child of consistency. And it's that inconsistency is what I think will be the determining factor in the game. I think overall, whichever team is the most consistent will probably win this game. But that's not the only factor. That's just my gut. I do believe probably the most consistent team will be the winner in this game. Now, looking at each team's schedule, we'll start there. Both teams played ranked opponents in the first week. Maryland, of course, going down, I think they played that game in Austin. And then it beaten, oh no, they didn't, what am I talking about? It's right there. They ended up beating Texas at home, but it was a ranked Texas team, and it was a team no one, including myself, really picked them to win. But they did win. Whether it be at home or in Texas, I don't think it matters as much, because of all the turmoil surrounding Maryland in the offseason. For them to come out and beat a ranked Texas team, if they play them on the moon, it wouldn't matter. I think that's impressive regardless. Michigan coming out of the gate, I'll be honest, in that Notre Dame game, I was thinking Michigan was going to sink back down to the annals of mediocrity again. I do believe they've proven me wrong in the next 4 games they played. considering they haven't given up more than 20 points to any of them since the Notre Dame game. So I do think Michigan is better than a lot of people, including myself, thought they were after that Notre Dame game. But both teams have shown inconsistencies as well. You look at Maryland week in that third game against Temple. They lost by a lot. And Temple, no offense to Owl fans out there, is a comparatively weaker opponent than Michigan. They're a comparatively weaker opponent than Texas or Minnesota, which Maryland beat both of. So they're a head scratcher of a team, these Terps, because why'd you lose to Temple? Like, I'm confident this would be a matchup against two ranked opponents if Maryland would have beaten Temple, because they dominated Bowling Green and Minnesota. Well, I know Bowling Green's a MAC school and they're struggling this year, but they still beat a Bowling Green team in Bowling Green, and they beat Minnesota at home by a large margin. If you go and look at Michigan, their defense has been outstanding. They knocked the socks off Nebraska 2 weeks ago, 56-10. Now, who's Nebraska? How good are they? Not very good. I believe they're still winless, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay, maybe that's not as an impressive a victory as it would have been a few years ago. But they've dominated their opponents, except for the Northwestern game last week. I don't understand what happened. Northwestern, I do think, is a better team than a lot of people give them credit for, but I do believe they're still 1-3 after that loss. Both these teams need to be more consistent. And that also makes it difficult to choose this winner because they're both so inconsistent. But they've played well also. They are both two good football teams. But they are also inconsistent. It's which Wolverines team shows up. It's which Terrapins team shows up. That's what's going to decide the outcome of this game. If Maryland comes out of the gate hot like they did against Texas, they can beat Michigan. If Michigan comes out cold like they did against Notre Dame, they're going to lose in the big house. They need to try to have some pride in where they're playing for Michigan. And for Maryland, they need to be able to keep that crowd quiet early, because it's going to be a big crowd to have a strong point. It always is, because Michigan fans love Michigan. They bleed maize and blue. So, there's that as well. Going forward here, looking at the two teams' rushing stats, Maryland does a good job of controlling the line of scrimmage, by and large, on both sides of the ball. As you can see, 258.5 rushing yards per game, ranks 10th nationally. Michigan, pretty good. Higbin is a pretty good running back, 205.6 yards per game rushing, 35th nationally, not bad. Both these teams know how to stop the run, so this could be a good, old-fashioned, classic Big Ten type of game with two teams that just knock each other or punch each other in the mouth on the lines, because neither team gives up much on the ground, whereas Michigan gives up 86.4 per game, ranking 7th nationally. Maryland only just over 100 yards per game, 104 to be exact, which ranks 18th. Both defenses are stout, as we'll look at in a minute here, or actually as we'll look at in a little bit when I look at the team's defenses in more depth. But rushing, I do believe this game will be who does win it in the trenches. Again, another factor I know. So far, what I can think right now, what we've looked at so far, the most consistent team and the team that can control the line of scrimmage will win this game. Looking at passing, neither team has been impressive at all in passing offense. In fact, both teams have been pretty awful. You can see Michigan, 206.2 yards per game, ranks 90th nationally, which is a very eye-opening statistic for me. And I'm sure a lot of the Michigan faithful and a lot of just people in general that watch college football must be scratching their heads, because who's coaching Michigan? Jim Harbaugh. What position did Jim Harbaugh play in college and the pros? Quarterback. What has he done by and large in the other programs that he's been with? Good quarterbacking coach. Look at Stanford with Andrew Luck. Look at the 49ers with Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith. He knows how to develop quarterbacks. What's going on now? Michigan hasn't had an exceptional quarterback since Denard Robinson. He was not explosive, but he was good enough, a good manager. Michigan hasn't had that really since. Devin Gardner was good kid. You never forget the Michigan-Ohio State game when I think it was Barrett got hurt, and he was one of the first ones over on the cart to kind of pat him on the back and look like he was saying, that's too bad. He was a good kid, but he was not a great quarterback. Wilton Spate, John O'Korn. I'm sure I'm leaving some names out. They have not had good play at the quarterback position in a long time. And it shows this year statistically. Maryland, I don't know when the last time they had a good quarterback was. I'm sure folks in the comment section, you can help me with that. But this year, they're pretty awful. 141.3 passing yards per game. In a time where so many teams are throwing the ball, it's mind-boggling to think a college football team is only throwing 141.3 yards per game. That ranks 121st nationally. I want to say there's 126 teams in college football. That's not good. But on the flip side, defensively, Michigan's only giving up 146.2 passing yards per game, ranking 4th nationally. If I'm Maryland, I'm not going to try to beat Michigan through the air. And on Maryland's defense, not great, okay. Middle of the pack, honestly, defensively, as far as passing yards go, 209.8 per game. They're giving up more than Michigan gains per game. It's not great. And that ranks 51st nationally. So for Michigan can have the advantage in this case with just looking at the last two splits we've seen. Michigan could win this game if they can establish the run early with the occasional pass here and there to keep Maryland honest. Michigan can attack this Maryland team with a more consistent, balanced offensive attack, whereas Maryland really has to rely more on the running. So it does put Maryland at a disadvantage. Looking forward, both teams they're okay offensively, efficiency-wise, but Maryland definitely owns it on red zone scoring percentage, as you can see there towards the bottom. Time of possession, Michigan does do a good job holding on to the ball, more than half the game. That's pretty good. Maryland, not so much, 28 minutes per game. First downs, you look at 101 versus 71. Michigan gets first downs, but when they get to third down, they aren't great at converting. Only 46%, which ranks 31st nationally. Not bad, but not great. Maryland, when they get to third down, they might as well send the punt team out because they're probably going to kick it. At 38% third down efficiency, that does not bode well for your defense if you're Maryland's offense, because that means consistently you're sending your defense right back out on the field once they stop the opposing offense's team on third down. That does not help your defense when your offense is consistently having to kick the ball away on 3 and outs. It'll make your defense gassed very quickly. Again, I played football. I know how it can be as a defense when you're looking at your offense and you're like, come on, guys. March the ball down the field. I'm tired. I need some water. 38% third down efficiency is not good for both sides of the ball if you're Maryland. Now, both teams have done a good job of holding onto the ball. With 4 turnovers lost for Michigan, 3 for Maryland. And again, not bad. The red zone is what hurts Michigan. The red zone touchdown percentage is only 67%. They're scoring touchdowns only 67% of the time when they get pat to the 20 or closer. 86% red zone scoring percentage, not horrible. Middle of the pack, 57th nationally. Penalties is what is going to make this game, is going to be another determining factor. Which team can play cleaner football? Because both teams, you can see, commit penalties quite often. Michigan at 9.2 per game, Maryland at 9.3. Pretty much we can say 9 per game. You can just use a good solid number there. Michigan 84.2 yards per game. They lose out on. They leave those 84.2 yards on the field on average per game. It's a lot of yards you could be using on either your defense or offense. With Maryland, 90.5 yards you're leaving on the field on average every game. Not good. And that could be a contributing factor to why they've played inconsistent, why they've struggled against seemingly lackluster opponents. Might have been why Maryland lost to Temple, and might have been why Michigan lost to Notre Dame. I didn't watch those games completely. I watched some of the Michigan-Notre Dame game. I watched some of the Maryland-Temple game. I didn't watch all of them. Or, I didn't watch both games the whole way through. But, penalties can kill drives. It can give the opponent first downs. It can keep your defense on the field longer. It can keep your offense off the field longer. They're not good. It's just not good, and it's self-imposed. You are in control of committing penalties. The opposing defense or offense can't force you into committing penalties. You have to play discipline, and you have to stop drawing the flags. Now looking at Maryland. Their red zone touchdown percentage, pretty good, 78%. But then you look down at the red zone scoring percentage. Wow! Every time they've gotten past the 20, they have scored. That's going to help them if they can consistently get down into the red zone. Against Michigan's defense, good luck. They don't tend to let teams into the red zone. Once they do, they're not very good at stopping them. We'll look at that in a minute. But those two stats really make this matchup even more interesting, doesn't it? Red zone scoring percentage. Maryland scores every time they get inside the red zone. Of course, that's first nationally. How can it not be? You literally can't get better than 100% inside the red zone. You can't get better than that. So, that's pretty daggone good for Maryland. So, the best offensive stat I see that they have on here, except they also have turned the ball over one last time to Michigan. But don't necessarily think turnovers are going to be as much of a factor in this game because both teams do a pretty good job of holding onto the ball. And Michigan's defense doesn't do a great job of forcing turnovers, which, again, we'll look at here in a little bit. I believe it'll be the next slide, or maybe a couple. But penalties. I can't stress it enough. Penalties can kill you, and I do think another contributing factor might be the team that commits the least amount of penalties can also win this game. And also the team that can also keep their defense off the field longer through good, sound, efficient offense, which neither team really has done a great job of this year. Looking at the team overall defense splits, we'll look at that first. Turnovers gained, Michigan's forced 5, Maryland's forced 8. Maryland has picked the ball off 6 times to Michigan's 4. Fumble recovered, not really a huge stat for either team, 2 for Maryland, 1 for Michigan. Both defenses are pretty good statistically overall as far as yards given up. Michigan ranks first nationally at 232.6 yards per game given up. That is impressive considering the teams they played. That is pretty daggone good. For Maryland, 313.8 yards per game given up. That's 20th nationally. Again, pretty good, considering both teams have played ranked opponents. Maryland with Texas and Michigan with Notre Dame. Pretty good, honestly. I think this will definitely be a low-scoring affair. I don't see high-powered offense in this game. If it does, it will shock me because neither offense has shown they're really that capable of scoring a lot of points this year, unless they're playing lackluster opponents. Neither of these teams, I would say, are lackluster opponents. So I do think this will be a low-scoring, classic, punch-them-in-the-mouth type of defensive game. it could be 9-6 or something crazy. Like they might even score touchdowns in this game. It might just be a battle of the kickers and field position. And I do believe that could also play a role. As we look at the defensive efficiency of both teams, pretty similar, pretty good, I could say. I mean, Michigan giving up 8,700, of course, and Maryland giving up only 77 first downs per game. Not too bad. Both teams are in the top 40 as far as defensive third down efficiency. Michigan 33% at 38th. Maryland definitely holds the advantage on their third down efficiency, which is only 29%, which means they're giving up they're only allowing teams to convert 29% of the time on defense, which ranks 14th for Maryland. Red zone touchdown defense percentage. Michigan's only giving up touchdowns 64% of the time when their opponent is within the red zone. Maryland 67%. Not great, but red zone defense overall. Michigan's allowing the team to score 91% of the time when in the red zone. It's 101st nationally. Now, I know, again, from experience, it's not easy to defend the red zone, especially nowadays with the high-octane offenses anyway. It's incredibly difficult to hold a team to no points when they get inside the red zone. Really, honestly, for the most part, the only thing you can really do is force third downs or sack them and knock them out of the red zone. Or block a kick, or if their field goal kicker isn't great and they miss a field goal inside of the red zone. Whatever, 91% red zone defense is not good. In fact, it ranks 101st nationally. Maryland, not great red zone defense, but not that bad either. 78%. That's 50th nationally, right in the middle of the pack. So what this tells me, what these splits tell me, is both teams are pretty good defensively as far as efficiency goes until they allow the opponent to get inside the red zone. And, as I said before, Maryland, when their offense gets in the red zone, forget about it, they're scoring some points. And Michigan, when they allow the team to get into the red zone, come on in, we're open for business. We're not even going to stop you, just march right in. Considering they've only stopped the teams from scoring in the red zone 9% of the time, that isn't great for Michigan if they're allowing Maryland into the red zone consistently throughout the game. That will definitely hurt Michigan. So there's that to consider. Moving forward, keys to victory. And I have mentioned more than I've talked about here, and I'll probably ad-lib a few here and there just from what we've already talked about. But for Michigan, first and foremost, they got to control line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They have to stop Maryland's running attack. They have to force Maryland to beat them through the air, and I don't think that's going to happen. If Michigan can stop them on both sides of the ball, Michigan should win really on that alone, the way both offenses have been playing. They also can't allow Maryland into the red zone. They have to keep them out of the red zone. Have to force 3 and outs. Michigan has to establish the run early to try and let loose with a long pass here and there to try and catch Maryland napping on defense. I touched on that earlier. They have to attack Maryland with a balanced attack. They can't just pass the whole game, and they can't just run the whole game. They have to keep Maryland guessing when they're on offense, or when Michigan's on offense. They need to keep Maryland's defense guessing. Michigan also needs to take advantage of Maryland's mistakes, like penalties. They need to force Maryland into mental mistakes. They need to force some turnovers, even though neither team has been stellar at committing turnovers. Neither team has turned the ball over. Michigan needs to force some turnovers. They need to force some short field for the struggling offense. And they give Shea Patterson short field to work with. Again, like I said, win the field position battle. And for Michigan, they need to take care of the ball like they have throughout the year. They're only averaging less than a turnover per game. That's really good. They cannot afford to turn the ball over in this game. Can't give Maryland a short field. For Maryland, they have forced Michigan to consistent 3 and outs. They have shut down that running game. They have forced Shea Patterson to have to beat them by shutting down that run. They have to make Shea Patterson uncomfortable in that pocket, make him scramble, make him make mistakes. Quiet the crowd through long offensive, long drawn out, hard nosed, running down the now Michigan's throat offense to quiet that crowd. And for Maryland, they also need to win the field position battle. They need to get into the red zone consistently. They need to force Michigan to long field. And they need to force turnovers, which they've done a good job at this year. They need to force Shea Patterson to make mistakes, and that's when their defense can take advantage and pick the ball off. And what I didn't mention here, again, I'll mention it again, both teams need to play clean football, disciplined football, which means no or very few penalties. I don't think you can have no penalties in this day and age, but few penalties, fewer penalties than 9. You can't afford to leave yards on the field. That's why I call penalties. You're leaving yards on the field. You can't do that. That allows the other team to get an advantage in the field position game, and for love of cake, so to speak, you allow Maryland to get in the red zone. If you're Michigan, you're probably going to give up some points. So you have to keep Maryland out of the red zone. And for Maryland, you need to get in the red zone. You need to put Michigan's defense on their heels. When they're put on their heels in the red zone, they usually give up points. You need to take advantage of that fact. And there are some interesting tidbits around this game. I mean, the last time Maryland beat Michigan was 2014 in Ann Arbor. So, Maryland has beaten Michigan in Michigan recently. Not horribly recently, but recently. So, they at least don't have that mental block like Indiana had against Ohio State, where they hadn't beaten them in a long time. Maryland has beaten Michigan in the past more recently. But Maryland has never beaten Michigan in Maryland. Michigan does own the series 6-1. And these two, I thought, were pretty staggering. I mean, I can't, it's hard to even fathom these. And Michigan is the most winningest football program in history. Sitting at 947-60. They've lost less than 100 games in their program's history, and that's including the Rich Rod years. They're 947-60-36. That's dominance. Maryland's all-time football record, pretty mediocre, to be honest. 647 wins, that's impressive. That's good on you. It shows you've been around for a long time. But 590 losses and 43 ties. I don't really have much of an opinion on ties, but that is part of their records. I mean, you gotta think. Overtime only around since 1996. So before that, if a team was tied at the end of regulation, then it's a tie. Even the national championship, before the BCS era, you had a tie, then you had a tie. Then the pollsters had to determine who the national champion is. Because you didn't have a traditional national championship game before BCS era like you do now. And these two teams have only met as Big Ten opponents 4 times since Maryland and Rutgers. Okay, I think I said 2013 earlier in the video. 2014, my mistake. And now the moment of truth. Haha, who to pick? I struggled with this pick for a while. I had to think about it a lot. I'm going to have to go with my gut a little bit, and a little bit with the stats, and just what my eyes have told me from seeing both these teams throughout the year so far. Like I said, the most consistent team, the team that plays the cleanest football, the team that controls the line of scrimmage, and wins the field position battle is going to win this game. For Maryland, when they get in the red zone, they do well. And for Michigan on defense, when they allow teams to get in the red zone, they do horribly. But I do believe Michigan will do a good job of keeping Maryland out of the red zone. I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game, because neither offense has been stellar statistically. I think Michigan will come out of the gate faster and stronger. I think they will play more consistent, especially since they're at home. I do think Michigan will win this game. Personally, I think it'll be 7 or less, because I do think they're both that evenly matched. If I had to pick a score, I'm going to pick a score. Just sake of argument, I'm going to say maybe something like 12-7. Something, or I said 3 or less, my bad. Like 12-9, we'll say. I really don't even think either team is going to be capable of scoring a touchdown. I do think it will be a field kicking battle and a field position battle. And who can play better, more disciplined, mistake-free football. I do think Michigan will struggle, like they did against Northwestern, but I do think, like in the Northwestern game, they will be tough, strong. They've shown they can come back from adversity in that game specifically, and I think that will help them, and I do think they'll beat Maryland because I do believe they are the stronger team talent-wise, and I do think, well, obviously their coach is more experienced than Maryland's coach. Maryland's going to come in tough. It may even be a 3-0 game at halftime in Maryland's favor. But I think Michigan will pull away slightly in the second half, and they will win 12-9. That's my pick. It's going to be a tough game. Like I said, it was very difficult for me to pick. I don't care if Michigan's ranked 15th and Maryland's not ranked. Like I said, if Maryland would have beaten Temple, I think they would have been ranked anyway. So I don't think the rankings really matter at all in this particular game, like it did in Ohio State and Indiana. It's going to be a tough game. I'm going to be looking forward to it. But I do think Michigan wins 12-9. That's my pick for this game. I hope you enjoyed my video. Please stop by for my next one. My next video will be for the Floyd of Rosedale, Iowa, and Minnesota. Until then, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.